All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wilson Brothers channel. I'm Isaac. This is David. Today, we are actually going over something very interesting surrounding Donald Trump's first 100 days in office. What is he going to do? Is he going to do the Project 2025 route that everybody's talking about? There's a lot of misinformation online. We want to clear that up with our guest today. New York Times bestselling author Mike Kimelman is with us. Mike, so glad to have you on the podcast today.
Awesome to be here, guys. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And so what we want to cover is very similar. We just want to go down kind of a list of topics for you, Mike, of what we could potentially cover. If you have anything you want to add as we kind of go through this, feel free to do so. So obviously there is a huge, the market really responded well during election night when Trump started winning. It seemed like every single swing state that fell for Trump, because he won all 7 of them, which is similar to a Reagan-style landslide in a lot of ways. It seemed like once he won Georgia, then he won North Carolina, then Pennsylvania dropped in his favor, and then the rest was just gravy at that point because he just needed Pennsylvania to win. It seemed like the market reacted to each and every state as it dropped his way in a positive way in the S&P and Bitcoin. So we're going to go over what the S&P 500 and the Dow Jones did as a result. We're going to cover cryptocurrency, what happened with Bitcoin. What is there investor optimism? Is the market actually excited about this? Is it doom and gloom? What would have potentially happened if Kamala Harris won the election, and what were the outcomes of that would have been on the markets? So let's start with the S&P 500, the Dow Jones. Mike, if you don't mind, give the audience a little background kind of on your story in the market, how you came up, and then we can kind of go into the analysis.
Sure. So my professional career started, I was an M&A lawyer, mergers and acquisitions for Sullivan and Cromwell, which is one of the big New York law firms. And that lifestyle is you sleep under your desk a couple days a week, you're working 80 to 100 hours. It was not the most fun. And this was during the late 90s. I'm dating myself here. But late 90s, and people were having a lot more fun, making a lot more money in technology and finance. I had some financial background, had always been a fan of the market. So I actually ended up lateraling into finance. And then over the next 15 years or so, I spent time on Wall Street in various roles, first as an analyst, then portfolio manager, eventually worked my way up, founded my own fund called Incremental Capital, grew that to about 250 million in assets, and then had a sort of existential event, which if you want to get the book Confessions of a Wall Street Insider, you can read about it there, but that sort of involuntarily retired me on Wall Street, and I spent some time just hanging out, and then had the good fortune to meet a friend of mine who was the president of the Bitcoin Foundation at that point. That was in 2014. I was a TradFi guy. I thought crypto was a scam, didn't believe in it. Fortunately, this guy was a good guy and took the time to educate me. And it probably took about a year to really understand it. And once you really understand it, you go down that rabbit hole, and I've never left. So I spent the last 7 or 8 years doing advisory and investment as part of my own firm in the blockchain space. As you guys know, Bitcoin, crypto, blockchain in general goes like that. It's probably the biggest boom bust cycles of any asset in history. The good part is if you're, Jack Long during the booms, you make a lot of money and have a lot of fun. And then if you're hopefully a little bit later at the top, you can use the bust to learn about and do research in other areas, other sectors. And some of these busts lasted pretty long, 2018, 2019, for instance. So during that time, not much was happening in the sector. I started advising and investing again in traditional finance with a focus on mostly healthcare, but also some technology, some energy. So I still advise certain hedge funds. I still run my own advisory and investment firm called Decryption Ventures. So I'm still pretty active in both traditional finance and blockchain.
That's amazing. Yeah, for us specifically, when you were coming up in this era, specifically with cryptocurrency, what did you notice as a primary difference from Bitcoin itself as an asset class to the traditional Dow, S&P 500? What was the thing that really interested you and kind of piqued your interest on that specific market segment?
Sure. Well, as someone with some economic training as well as financial training, I've been aware, and read the Austrian guys and everything else for the last 15, 20 years and understood that what we were doing as a country was just unsustainable between the Fed printing money, between interest rates not accurately sort of forecasting the cost of money. There's been tons of manipulation. And what was interesting about Bitcoin, A, it was peer-to-peer, B, it was censorship resistant, all the good things that you don't have in the traditional system. I mean, anybody who goes to, Bank of America or Wells Fargo, types up their account, looks at their account, thinks that's their money, is sorely mistaken, as I learned the hard way. And some other people have, they can flick a switch. And unfortunately, the country was heading towards a direction over the last 10 years that really made that obvious. If you're familiar with Operation Choke Point or Choke Point 2.0, I mean, if you're in the wrong sectors, gaming, gambling, cannabis, porn, whatever it is, and the government doesn't like what you're saying, firearms, they can flip that switch and suddenly you have no banking, no access to credit. So the importance of divorcing the state from money, I think, can't be understated. It's incredible. Bitcoin obviously was that asset, and it made perfect sense to me why it would potentially, exponentially grow in value. But what was interesting too was from a trading and investing perspective, Bitcoin is really a purely emotional asset. So it reacted to technical analysis and other things. It doesn't really have a fundamental base, but it reacted to technical analysis in an incredibly easy to forecast way. And it became a terrific asset just to trade. And I think, you've had, when I first started trading, you could do these read and react type trades on the hedge fund desk where if, let's say NVIDIA had earnings, Broadcom would do really well. So you could be quick enough to buy Broadcom off like an earnings beat by AMAT or NVIDIA or something like that. By 2006, almost all of that was gone. It had started to become the machines, and it was all algorithms. That's completely happened now. But even in 2003, 4, 5, 6, 7, the machines were front running everybody, and it became harder and harder to do these sort of read and react trades or add alpha and value as a human. Whereas Bitcoin, that had not yet gotten ingrained. So you could trade Bitcoin, and it was so much cleaner than trading something on the NASDAQ or anywhere else. But that's just the sort of trading side. I find it super interesting and just one of the most compelling assets I've ever seen, more from what it could do for humankind and what it could do for the people of this country and the world by taking the state out of money, taking all that manipulation, that corruption and everything else, and using this sort of neutral asset.
Yeah. How nervous were you on the day of the election? Because as a business guy, as a crypto guy, I bet you were about to pee yourself, bro.
Honestly,
how nervous were you?
Honestly, I really wasn't. And I'll tell you why. I mean, if you guys have read my letter, and I know you have, I publish on Substacks called Sovereign Sunday on Sundays. For the last 6 months, I was adamant that this was locked up, that Trump was going to win, that there was only, the only chance they could do would have been just massive, massive cheating, even greater than we saw in 2020. And a lot of the signals that I had seen told me that wasn't going to be possible. We're not to the same levels as it was in 2020.
Too big to rig.
It's too big to rig. It's always harder to run a con the second time because people are looking for it, and people were paying attention this time. You had people like Elon Musk, who is, obviously one of the most competent people in the history of the world, with his tremendous access to resources, capital, and technology. You had a better crew of people at the RNC, a better crew of people in the Trump campaign out there. You had lawyers farming out. So I thought there was going to be a 2 to 3% cheat sort of margin, maybe up to 5%. But everything I had seen in my own research and proprietary indicators and talking to people said that Trump, in a fair election, was probably going to win by double digits. And again, of course, that came down. And of course, there was a lot of things that probably still did happen. But I felt very confident he was going to win. But even having said that, you just never know. So
Yeah.
There was, the most interesting part of the election to me was maybe around 8 p.m. And I was out in the Hamptons with a small, very small group of friends who were all very pro-Trump people. Those guys were more nervous than I was, but we were flipping around just to see what was on TV. And CNN, around 8 p.m. or so was like, she's got her path to victory and it's looking just like 2020, but it looks good and this and that. And I was like, holy shit, is there a chance they're actually going to cheat this one and win as well? And then the two biggest tells, of course, everybody knows, is type up Bitcoin, and Bitcoin was boop, straight up.
Vegas,
Poly market.
Yeah, that was what I would look at all night.
So all the places where people were putting actual money to work were telling you that, TV, mostly CNN and the leftist stations, were full of shit. So that gave me a lot of confidence. And then, within a half hour, that started seeping through to mainstream media, and it was over. I mean, we were popping the good stuff.
Did you see the poll in Iowa that before the election said that Trump was going to lose? And then as soon as the election happened, about a week later, recently, actually 17 hours ago, so this is breaking news, she actually stepped down.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it goes to show you that even the pollsters themselves can be full of crap. Yes. Because they only do a segment of about 1,200 people. And those people, I've never gotten a call from a pollster asking me my opinion on anything. So I think what people are saying specifically is this new Trump era, they're calling it the golden age of finance in a lot of ways, because people are getting away from mainstream media propaganda. And they, like you said, they had a chance to do that in 2017 to paint Trump as a fascist, as a Nazi, as a threat to democracy, which we're a constitutional republic, which is insanity. There's a lot of things that you said, which I agree with. The first time they had a chance to do it and they succeeded, Biden got 81 million views, which it still blows my mind because I don't believe that's true in the slightest. And then 2024, all of a sudden that tapers off and Elon Musk gets involved, buys X.com, decides to set up a super PAC, and then basically goes all in. And he was asked about that, and he said, I go in to win. I'm all in on anything that I do. And they're asking, like, why did you start campaigning for him? He's like, why wouldn't I? Right. Yep. That's the thing. If you do anything in life, you have to go all in. There's no way to half-ass anything when you're trying to make yourself known to the market. So that being said, Mike, what are your thoughts with Trump now that he's become president-elect? He started putting out cabinet members. Some are controversial. Some are not so controversial. What do you think are some of the key factors for him in the first 100 days in office that you would see as a path to success for the markets and just everything in general? Could be foreign policy.
Sure. And that's a difficult question because there's so much to do. I mean, there really is. And he has to sort of figure out what he could tackle and do almost unilaterally. Obviously he has the House and has the Senate, but there are still the dying throes of that legacy, neocon GOP rhinos that are probably going to throw up some obstacles. The Democrats, of course, what they're going to do. So the best thing he could do is figure out what he could do on his own unilaterally. And there's quite a lot. I mean, this is the beautiful part about, how sort of corrupt and demented the Democrats have been from Obama and on, is they've used executive orders. They've used powers that they're probably not supposed to do and done things in a way. You saw Biden with the student loan ignoring the Supreme Court. You've seen him with the executive orders that basically open the border. So Trump has the ability, especially with the executive branch and control of DOJ and some of the other stuff, to take a lot of unilateral action. So, day one, you close the border and you completely shut that down, whether it is just, and you don't need to do that much other than bring a return to normalcy. I mean, they were given orders to stand down, and it became official American policy to basically let anybody and everybody in. So you change that. He's already telegraphed that, I think, to Mexico and some of the other nations. If you need to, you can put the National Guard or military on the border to secure it. You start with, and I don't want to dig too deep into it. I think the remigration / deportation stuff is going to happen and should happen. Certainly the low-hanging fruit or the criminals or people who broke the law or these, or these students, marching for Hamas on college campuses that have green cards or visas and aren't actual citizens. I mean, those guys can all go day one and nobody raises any issues. The rest of them, you sort of have to help along, by empowering things like E-Verify, making employers bear the burden, removing benefits. Eventually, most people will self-deport or a lot of them. I mean, they made it so, you get the $10,000 in debit cards, you get the free housing, the free education and healthcare. Milton Friedman said it best: you can't have open borders in a completely, nonstop welfare system. That just doesn't work. So a lot of these people will self-deport, but I think if you get rid of the criminals, close the border, that's critical. 2, election integrity. I mean, there's nothing more important. As Alon said constantly, this could be the last election. I've been writing that for years because
so did Oprah.
yeah. I mean, really, you get to a point where 20 million illegals, you give them amnesty and put them in. You keep the sort of fraudulent, no election integrity or verification whatsoever. You could just take every election from here on out. So they have to reverse that. And obviously voter ID will be a big thing. It's a little trickier than just snapping your fingers on that one, because under the Constitution, the states are the ones who determine what it looks like on a per state basis. But there's lots of leverage you could bring to bear there. Same with the colleges. If they're not, honoring free speech and enforcing, some of the right modes of behavior, you can cut off federal funding. You could penalize them in many ways. I think most states will fall in line with voter ID. There may be a few like California and others that resist it to the end. But like I said, there's plenty you can do on the leverage front to get that through and bring the case to the people. And so I think those are 2 big ones. 3, you got to go in and start just cleaning out the cancer. I mean, the scariest thing is you see the corruption, you see the money laundering. There's so much of our government that is just endemically corrupt and fraudulent. You've got failing institutions across the board. I love the DOGE, government accountability and efficiency project. You have to do something with that, but you also have to do it in a smart way. And this gets into the markets and other economic areas, because if you think about it, if you look at what the markets have done, we probably should have hit a recession at some point this year and just didn't. Just kept going. Everybody was talking about soft landing, maybe hard landing. We really didn't get a landing at all. But the problem is we're spending more money on the government side than we've ever spent in history. I mean, if you looked at what they did pre-election, it was something like $500 billion in the last 35 days. So you've got an economy that's literally just juiced on pure government spending and sugar and printing and everything else. That is probably going to end, or at least it has to slow down. We're rapidly hitting that debt spiral area where our interest payments on our debt and our ability to fund the government is going to get harder and harder. So you have to do something, but it's sort of a paradox in that if you right size the government, and I'll be super frank, I mean, if Elon can come in and cut 80% of Twitter, which is a private company for profit, and the thing didn't miss a beat and now is better than ever, what do you think he could do to the federal government? I mean, I've heard something like 70% of these people go into work like once a month, like are supposed to show their face. I'm sure the hours they work are non-existent, and government itself is just completely inefficient. It hasn't been upgraded. There's no technological AI productivity measures that have been passed. And it's sort of a collection of lifers who know they have the job, know they won't be fired, and serve that administrative state as their God. So the reality is you could probably cut 95% of it and not miss a beat. But in reality, think about the Department of Education or any of these other things that don't really work and have been a strain on resources. That's 300,000 people. If you flick a switch, Thanos style, and 300,000 people are now unemployed, think about what that does to the economy, to unemployment and everything else. So it's really sort of a fine line you have to walk between right sizing the government and understanding you're probably going to induce a recession of some sort in the first 6 months. And that's, that becomes a political football more than anything else. If you think about, and I know you youngsters are way too young for this, but Reagan in like 82 had to make some tough choices, deregulation, raise rates because inflation was happening. And some of those same choices are here now with the inflation, which hasn't really gone away, still is very painful. If you make those cuts and adjust the economy and right size it and make it more productive and all of that, you still have to have that, painful restructuring which probably causes a recession, which is very difficult in a heavily debt layered economy. So they got to walk that fine line. I'm not sure how they're going to do it. I'm not as bullish as you might think with Trump winning. I mean, from a personal, professional, political, spiritual standpoint, couldn't be more bullish.
Yeah,
I mean, look around. I mean, how good is the country right now? And again, we're probably in our own echo bubble a little bit, but it feels like there's a sense of optimism and joy that's back. You see the football players dancing. People are proud to be Americans again. Yep, exactly.
People you never thought would be are
People are loving it. And again, this is a pent up rubber band for 8 years. People like myself, and again, I was canceled once before, so I was more fearless than most. But most people were terrified of coming out and saying, I support Trump, or I'm a Republican, or anything else, because the whole cancel culture weight of mainstream media would go after you and target you and try to dox you and cancel you and eliminate you. You know, it's no different than during COVID. If you were one of those people sane enough to say, hey, I don't know, this shot, you just came out with it, you haven't done any long-term studies, you want me and my family to get it for something that probably won't hurt me. I don't know about that. Canceled, done. So that stigma got erased, and it got erased a little bit. And then after they tried to kill Trump, it was gone, because I think there were so many people who were angry at that. So many people who were fed up with the way things were happening that they just came out and said, fuck it. Sorry if I'm cursing or whatnot. Said, I'm putting on the MAGA hat. I'm putting on the Trump shirt. And you know what? That stigma got washed away when you got guys like Elon Musk and David Sachs, who had been very early and very supportive of Trump. Sean McGuire, all these other people in Silicon Valley came out and elsewhere and said, you know what? This is the only sane way forward for our country. What the Democrats have done in the last 10 years has been so insane. I mean, in the last 4 on steroids, but that we have to take a different approach. And once that happened, there was no doubt Trump was going to win. But
wow,
that has flown through. And I'm sorry if I'm completely, quarterbacking the mic here, but
go for it.
That has flown through to the economy. And as you guys know, you've been trading long enough and investing long enough. Animal spirits make up a big part of sort of the investment climate. So when people are speculative, risk on, getting crazy, and you see it now in altcoins and Bitcoin's price and some of these, high beta assets, when that happens, stock prices tend to do better. PE multiples expand. Everything does well. The problem with that is we've had that PE expansion for the last couple of years. And if you look at things like NVIDIA and Tesla and all these other Mag 7 and sort of the stocks, they've completely been hugely responsible for a disproportionate amount of the gains in the averages, while the rest of the stocks have done okay, but they haven't done great. And so you have these PE multiples that are already really stretched, that feels like an end of the cycle move, where if Kamala had won, I think we would have seen such a wash down. It would have been so painful, and not just from her ridiculous policies on, capital gains or anything else. It just would have been a market being like, all right, we've had enough. There's nothing we can do. But Trump, the excitement's still there, but that's going to hit I won't say it'll hit a wall, but it's going to hit a lot of headwinds soon when people start seeing and deciding, hey, tariffs, good for the long term. If people are going to cheat us on trade and try to undercut us, it's something that's necessary. It'll help onshore production to America, which is what we need. And we saw during COVID and everywhere else that we desperately need that. But again, it could cause prices to go higher in the near term. And inflation is still not great. You've got a Fed who I think has completely sort of, I can't even figure out what they're doing. I thought their 50-point cut before the election was very political and ridiculous. I don't know why they cut last week when you still have inflation numbers that are up there. And then that Trump's coming in, you're going to have those animal spirits and that excitement. Markets are an all-time high. Those aren't the type of metrics that you cut under, but they're still cutting. I mean, maybe they're done now. Maybe there's 1 or 2 more cuts. But you've got a lot of headwinds that Trump has to tackle. And some of the other scary parts are, look, I'm sure you guys expected more of a deep state / Democratic push to interfere with the election, to interfere with Trump, to interfere with the inauguration. And maybe we're just in a honeymoon, or the eye of the hurricane, but they've been really quiet and non-existent.
Which just scares me more, honestly, because why would they be so quiet right after an election where they got absolutely decimated?
Yep. Well, I think part of it was just too big. Like, I think they had a lot of contingency scenarios that you could run if it was, hey, you lost the, popular vote again and lost a couple of the swing states. And they're still counting in Pennsylvania. They're still counting in California and Nevada and some of these other places, Arizona. So you could see what the path was going to be if it was a really contested, tight election. We'd still be counting in December, and eventually they try to steal it and there'd be a huge, sort of big fallout. And I think part of the move in markets above 6,000 in the S&P and part of the rest of it was excitement about Trump, but it was more excitement about certainty. Markets hate uncertainty. And we got the certainty that you and I and a lot of Americans desperately craved. So it's reacted to that. But there are some other factors now that worry me, such as, some of the analogs I've looked at. Look, I don't want to say 1929 or 1987, but we're very stretched with a very high, levered up economy. There's a lot of factors that you just have to take the pain right now, just like cutting out of cancer if you're a patient. And that sets us up for, 5 to 10 years of amazing prosperity and growth if we really let Elon, Vivek, Trump, and all the rest of them get in there and fix government.
How does somebody is there any way to avoid the inevitable that you're talking about? Because you're saying we're going to hurt in order to heal, right? It's with any wound, you have to heal.
Yep.
You have to hurt in order to heal. If you were advising somebody, how can somebody sidestep that as much as possible and get ahead in business? Because we saw the S&P 500 go up 1.3 trillion in 24 hours. The entire stock market, like you said, is shot up, but we dug ourselves such a hole. How can business people such as Isaac and I, we're trying to grow a business, how can we get ahead and not be in a worse situation than we are now if we're going to go through that kind of small recession, if you want to call that?
Yeah. And I think, look, the market and the economy is dramatically changing. And if you're young, like you guys are, and smart, and you clearly have, created your own brand and your own identities, there's a lot of different ways to make money than just markets. And I hate telling people who tell me, hey, I want to trade, can I hire you to coach me? And, there are people I've done that with. But for your average person, you're better off learning a skill or a trade, learning how to, again, whether it's a podcast or a plumber, an electrician, or just creating, digital marketing, you name it. If you have a business, especially a real business that's tangible, that's sort of AI proof, you're probably better putting your incremental dollar into that business and making your business better, growing your business. There's going to be, again, look at the boomers that are out there. There's so many of them who are tired or old or need money. They're going to be dropping out of the workforce, dropping out of their own, entrepreneurial and small businesses. A lot of them are going to be selling those. So there may be businesses similar to yours that somebody has already built over 40 or 50 years of brand, but he wants out. He's tired. And maybe his kid isn't, interested in taking over that business. So you could roll up similar businesses near you. You could do JVs, partnerships, all of that stuff, I think, is probably a better idea to lean into your skill set than try to speculate in markets. But when it comes to markets, just be agnostic. That's what I've always sort of tried to coach people on. See what's working now. It may not be the S&P. It may just be Bitcoin. It may be altcoins. I'm never going to tell people to speculate in meme coins, but meme coins have been, exploding for the last week or two. So if you can be nimble in that area and want to play those games, play it. But if that's not your game, don't try to play it against professionals who know exactly what they're doing, unless you have somebody that can hold your hand and show you how it's done. But I think we're going to see a commodity boom at some point. Maybe, again, it's hard to time these things because there may be a recession, but, we just haven't done enough. There's not enough assets out there. If you're going to have, all of India, all of China, all of the BRICS coming online, you need more copper, you need more, lithium, you need all of these things in order to keep sort of the economy humming. So commodities look good, except for oil. I've got a little bit of a hiccup on oil because
Really? Why?
Yes, because I love Trump and he's so bullish on it, and he's going to drill, baby, drill, and he's going to permanent it happen. So economics 101 is supply and demand.
Yeah.
If he says, hey, remember those 75 sites? And I'm looking at some actually myself for an investment group in Alaska and other places that have been off limits. Those are now open to drilling. You're going to get a tremendous amount of supply coming online. Now it takes time. I mean, oil is not like, flip a switch and it starts running. This could be 12 months, 18, 24 months, 36 for some projects. But you have to remember the most important thing I'll say today is the market is a discounting mechanism. That means it prices now what's going to happen in the future. So if the market thinks there's going to be tremendous oil supply coming online, oil trades down now or soon ahead of that. So, oil was in the low 70s. I think oil could trade to the low 50s. Maybe not. I mean, if there's a recession, it'll get there a lot quicker. The one thing that will help oil is you saw what Joe Biden did for political reasons, drain the entire SPR, the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. So we have to refill that at some point. So that will put a little bit of a bid underneath oil. But still, if Trump says, hey, all the oil in the world is going to hit the market, it should probably trade down.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
I had a question for you as well. Lindy Lee was on the Will Cain show. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She was a Kamala staffer that was basically in charge of raising, if not most of the money for the campaign. Kamala raised over $1 billion in campaign financing, ended up being $20 million in debt.
Yep.
She was on the show with Will Cain and said, they lied to us. They absolutely lied to us. They said that we were going to win. We were going to win in a landslide. All my donors are pissed. The number one donor for the Democratic Party, which is a part of a big family, I think all of you out there, if you do research, can figure out who that is pulling out their donations from the DNC. So that being said, if you are a fiscal finance guy and you want to see what the markets are going to do, see the amount of money that Trump did in his campaign versus what Kamala did. Trump raised about $350 million and won with that. He won with what they call in-time real marketing, which means that he could go on a podcast of Theo Vaughn, Joe Rogan, all of these young people are watching this. And that's where the mainstream media is dying because these podcasts are taking over. They say in the future that presidential candidates are going to have to go on long-form podcasts and accurately explain their ideas. What is your prediction, Mike, for who's going to run for the Democratic Party in 2028 and who's going to run for the Republican Party?
So I think the Republican one is a lot easier. Depending on how Trump's 4 years go, I think J.D. Vance will be the front runner. I'm a huge J.D. Vance fan. I think he's one of the most articulate, intelligent people that we've ever seen, and he carried a lot of weight for Trump. There's nobody on the Democratic side who has the ability to go into a hostile environment and actually present your issues, your message, and field questions. I mean, J.D. was fearless. Same with Vivek. Those are two of the most articulate, intelligent, fearless people the Republican Party's ever seen. They'll go on CNN, MSNBC, any environment, anytime. Nobody in the Democratic space, and certainly not Kamala. Kamala was perhaps the biggest stereotype ever of that inability to think on your feet and, only field a couple of pre-scripted questions from a teleprompter. And then they'd have to go edit it anyway because
I think Tampon Tim fell in love with JD during the debate.
He did. He was definitely crushing hard on him.
He was agreeing with them a lot.
I think the Democrats, and I think there will be a primary unless Republicans are smart. If Trump has a good 4 years, it should be a coronation probably for J.D. Vance, but I think you will get a primary potentially with Vivek and J.D. and a couple other people.
You have the neocons of Nikki Haley's of the world come back and take another swing at it.
They'll always try, but if Trump is successful in these 4 years, I think they're buried. Put them on the wood chip pile. They're done.
Who's the VP for Vance if he runs?
So I would love to see Vance Vivek because I think those are the two most accomplished, highest IQ. I know people have some concerns about Vivek, and they should. I mean, we haven't seen him in action. It's easy to talk a good game. But from sheer raw brain power and execution, I mean, he's been one of the most impressive people I've ever seen. I think there's a chance that there will be some pressure or inclination to field a female. So maybe Tulsi, if she does a good job during her 4 years. And there's some other people. I think the Republican bench is so much deeper than the Democrats. And if you look at it,
so much
that comes from, you're forged under fire. I mean, for 8 years, if not 20 years, Republicans have been belittled, made fun of, slandered, attacked, canceled. If you could stand, and Trump's one of the few people that could have fielded what he's fielded and still be walking.
I think the only one.
And cheering. Maybe the only one, really. And I was a DeSantis fan. I didn't think he should have been the candidate, but DeSantis would have got buried underneath,
he would have gotten, man, it would have been bad.
So I think people have been forged, and we've built a really deep bench on the Republican side from, these 8 years of sort of underground training and resistance. And now the Democrats, who get spoon-fed everything and get 97% MSN glowing press, have no idea how to interact or compete on a real playing field. So I don't know who they'll have. I think Josh Shapiro is impressive, but he's Jewish, and I don't want to say that will be prohibitive for him, but in a party that despises, Israel and has a lot of anti-Semitic elements in it, I think he'll be problematic for them. I can't see that happening. And I'm not frankly sure that the country's ready for that either. And that's, something we can talk about another time if you want, but I think he is a possibility. And he's smart enough to say to Kamala, no, thank you, when she wanted him. As the VP. Yeah, I mean, it's unclear whether that happened, but there's a lot of whispers that that's what actually happened, because when she chose Waltz, I mean, I was popping the champagne. I was like, how the fuck did you pick this guy?
Do you remember Craig, or our mutual friend Craig said, was it 2024? He said that The Rock would be the Democratic nominee.
Yes.
I mean, that could be possible in 2028.
Well, he put like $100 on it. He said The Rock. I mean, $100. It was like
one crazy odds.
And The Rock would have been a better candidate. I mean, certainly, he could have done worse than. She was literally the worst
candidate. Newsom turned it down as well. Gavin Newsom turned it Kamala down. That's what the reports were saying. But Lindy Lee, it's interesting you said Shapiro, because she said she's best friends with Shapiro. She said that he's already planning on running.
Yeah.
And then the other second candidate would be Gavin Newsom. I would say Gavin Newsom.
I fear Gavin. I think Gavin's actually
formidable.
A difficult person. I think obviously his policies are insane and destructive, and his track record's horrific. But let's face it, we're a very physical and aesthetic population, where if we see somebody who's tall or good looking or smooth or articulate, that's probably 80% of the people just check the box.
I should get in politics.
You're a white man, bro. I should get a white. Well, if you were a Democrat, you couldn't be white. So
I could identify as black. I mean,
it's the same as in jury duty or anywhere else. I mean, you look at the people, and people make snap physical judgments about people. Mm-hmm. And Gavin is, he's the Joker. He's good looking. He's charismatic. He's well spoken.
David, pop up that comment on the screen that Sharon just made. Yeah, this is actually a really good point. Gavin is Pelosi's nephew.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's Sharon. Thanks for saying that. I think Pelosi's running for the hills. There, a lot of people said that Bill Gates is actually freaking out right now. I think a lot's going to happen. And this is actually something that I'm selfish about, that I want to get your opinion on, Mike, as we finish. Yeah. What are your thoughts on the JFK files, the Epstein files, and the Diddy files?
I was actually about to ask,
because I think that is one of the most interesting things that's going to happen. And Trump promised that he was going to release them. Also, last but not least, Ross Ulbricht. Do you think he's going to free him on day one?
Yes. If not day one, certainly in the first, month. There's a whole pardon process you have to go through, or clemency process. So I think he will be freed very soon.
I hope so.
I think, there's two task force they got to form immediately. One is a voter integrity task force that goes out and looks at everything now that's taking place in Pennsylvania and California, in all of these late counting districts, and really goes through it and, again, investigates, prosecutes anybody that's committing fraud, and does a heavy deterrent with it. That task force also should look at 2020, 2018, 2022, because they were all fraudulent. And that's a longer conversation, but I'll tell you why those were all fraudulent another time. The second task force should be the government sort of transparency that goes in, and certainly JFK, Epstein, Diddy, and other areas as well. I mean, you talked about Kamala raised $1 billion for Act Blue, or raised $1 billion. Go look at Act Blue. Like, where did $1 billion come from her, or $1.5 billion or $2 billion? You go look at some of those Act Blue donations and the other things. There's like, senior citizens that are donating to 27 candidates that have never heard of anybody. It's all just a big money laundering operation.
That's like Ukraine.
Unfortunately, like much of government, like much of Ukraine, like much of all of the sort of, other factors of government, it's just money sloshing around to each other, whether they, fund an NGO and that NGO gives back to their campaign or gives something else nearby to a family member. That there's a tremendous amount of fraud in the government and corruption, and Trump should root it all out. And, you got to clean out the jackals and the vipers. These people need to go. And part of that will be, I hope he does the Epstein. I think the Epstein stuff is going to be tougher than the Diddy stuff. I think the Diddy stuff is like more the salacious entertainment people that they co-opted for popular culture to make sure they stayed in line. Kanye talks about that stuff all the time. I think the Epstein stuff is a lot more the real people, the 100 people or so who rule the world behind the scenes, the Gates,
I agree.
and the Clintons, and those people. And I agree, they're in trouble. I mean, Trump should, no amnesty and no mercy, go after him. I mean, Gates is, I think, already wanted in The Hague for some of his vaccine efforts. And, certainly he and Clinton and others are frequent flyer program milers on the Lolita Express to Epstein Island. So you got to go after these people. You can't let a cancer like that exist. You saw what happened in 2016. And I think he learned his lesson. He thought it was going to be business as usual. I won, I get to rule. And Obama and Hillary and everybody else started immediately with the Russia hoax and trying to undermine using the force and levers of the DOJ, CIA, and security state to basically, pull a soft coup and marginalize him. So you got
Obama was the love child of the Democratic Party for years and years and years. And then all of a sudden, recently, decided to scold black men if they didn't vote for Kamala. And then he started campaigning, and all of a sudden you saw the joy just start to get sucked out of his soul. It seemed like he was desperate because he knew something was about to happen to him. Yeah. Right. And that for me is very interesting, because why would you have to pay Beyonce $10 million? And then Oprah said she never got money, but her company got money and she's a billionaire. So if you really believe in a political campaign and you want to bring Kamala on to interview her, why would you need all these celebrities like Meg Thee Stallion getting paid $5 million, Eminem getting paid $1.8 million? And when on Trump's side, you ask the celebrities, did you get paid by the Trump administration? No, I just love my country. It's a polarized difference that the majority of Americans are waking up to the fact that celebrity endorsements mean jack shit.
Yeah.
They just mean nothing, because people are waking up. I want my gas to go lower. I want my groceries to be lower. I want to have a better quality of life. And I see these celebrities trying to gaslit me into a state of complacency and just do whatever the mainstream media tells you. And I think people are finally waking up, and it's a renaissance.
Yeah, I have one more question I want to ask you, because I know you have a hard shut off at 2. Do you think anything is going to happen in the next 2 months that could prevent Trump from being sworn in? I've seen the Alex Jones videos of certain things internationally could happen that could make it so they shut down the government. Martial law. They shut down the government, keep Kamala or Biden in office longer, and just say, hey, Trump, you can't come in.
Real quick, but before he answers that, I thought it was hysterical when Trump went to the White House and met with Biden. Biden looked so happy.
Yeah. Happiest he's ever been.
Yeah, he's just smiling.
He's like Kaiser Soze. He pretended to be an invalid for 4 years to get Trump elected.
And he did it. As soon as Trump got elected, he did a press conference, and he was so articulate. Yeah, comparably to what he was. Anyways, Mike, over to you.
I think it's a very dangerous time. I don't think anything will happen. That doesn't mean they're going to not try. And the sort of scenarios that run through my head are as we've mentioned, some of the economic stuff is a little fragile. Crashing the markets would be a perfect one. Or waiting till Trump got in to really crash it and pull out some of the pillars. And, there's things you could do to certainly cause economic weakness or try to push it a little bit in that direction. That's one. Two, they're already trying to do. And I give Trump credit for getting out there and saying enough is giving Ukraine authorization to strike inside of Russia, long-range missiles. You start World War III, it's tough to do a transfer of power. And these people are so demented and dangerous and desperate that they would risk, nuclear war, the annihilation of the entire earth in order to hold on to power. So I think it was very smart of Trump to publicly go out there and say to both Putin and Zelensky, hey, nobody's authorizing this. We're done. Stand down. New administration, reset in, 2 months? Just chill. And that's the right move. And hopefully they listen, because that could get stupid scary quickly. And then the third thing is, there's all types of whatever, people are talking about the UFO stuff that's out there.
Yeah.
There's, pandemic. I wouldn't put it past him, because again, theoretically, people like Gates, Clinton, I think they'll be hesitant to do Obama because of the racial aspect, but these people deserve to be investigated and potentially prosecuted if they broke the law. So, when you're facing that type of loss of power and money, I mean, the analogy I always use is 3 people, doing a 3-on-3 in basketball with 10 grand on the line are going to call fouls. They're going to cheat. They're going to say, hit my arm, and do 100 other things, try to push the ref in a direction. When you've got 100 trillion on the line and your freedom and your life and all the power in the world, what wouldn't you do in order to tilt your way? So that's the part that scares me. I don't think they'll be successful, because I think the election was so much of a mandate in a landslide, and you're already seeing Trump move quickly. He's already learned, clearly a lot of the lessons the first time. He's picking people who are loyal to him. He's not vetting them through the FBI. He's using private resources. He should certainly do the same and, get Eric Prince and some of his people involved in security. I think he'll be okay, but I do think it's a dangerous time the next 2 months for sure.
All right. Last thing before we go.
I was going to say best cabinet pick and worst.
And then I have one other question, and then we'll hop off.
Oof.
Best and worst.
Best one.
That's a tough one. That's a good question, David.
So far, I'm a big Pete Hegseth fan, but we got to see what he does. I think, I mean, it's hard to say, but I think he's a super strong potential reformer. I think all of these people in all of these roles need to really restructure and reform the place first and get rid of the cancers and, move forward that way. I don't know if there is a worst. I think Gates is a little bit problematic just, because of his reputation and his ability to get through. And I don't know if he needs to get through. I mean, maybe he's a recess appointment for 200 days. But again, he's a guy who will go in there and kick doors. So that may be a good thing. I don't love, was it Kristi Noem as Homeland Security? And that's honestly a purely not misogynistic, but a traditionalist approach. I don't believe women are best suited for roles of protector roles and security. I don't think women should be frontline in the military or leading, a law enforcement division. It's just, there are certain biological differences. There are certain experiential differences when you're fighting crime or dealing with gangs or warfare. And, this runs into a whole longer concept, but men and women are situated differently from a cognitive perspective when it comes to risk seeking and risk taking. And some of these roles require additional aggression, which maybe testosterone gives you, additional risk seeking and whatnot. So I'm not sure she's the perfect person for that role, but I don't know much about her or her management style or whatnot. And, again, it's government. So if you have a couple of good deputies or lieutenants, they could probably do 90% of it. But I like a guy like Tom Horman. Like Horman's my guy. If you want to close the border and deal with it, he is the one.
Such a savage, a savage. Last question for you before we hop off. And this is a pretty interesting one. 2 scenarios. Scenario number 1, Joe Biden potentially, pardons his son. Scenario number 2, Trump pardons him or allows him to be investigated. Which would be the best scenario?
I've written before, I think, and I wrote this like a month ago, I think Trump should be approaching Biden now, or already has, and cutting a deal with him and saying, look, you're old, you're about to go anyway, but you've got your whole family out there. You know, sure, you could pardon Hunter, but there may be other things that pop up that he did. There may be things that we could investigate you for, you know, on the corruption side or the bribe side from Ukraine, China, and whatnot. How about we cut like a master sort of deal where you give me all the information, all the evidence, all the corruption that took place during your, you know, time in office, implicate Barack, implicate Hillary, implicate whoever you want, but we'll give you, you know, blanket immunity for you and your family. And you guys can go to your Delaware beach and hang out and be done, but you'll never be investigated or prosecuted. But all of the people around you who enabled a lot of this, because frankly, look, he's what, you know, I don't know how old he is, 81, 82.
He's old.
But he hasn't been mentally there for years. It's not like he's the guy pushing the buttons these days. There are people behind him, whether it's Obama, whether it's people close to him, you know, the Jake Sullivans, Anthony Blinkens, and other people in the administration. There are people who should have to answer, though, for some of the things he's done. And that's an easy deal to cut if you're Biden. I mean, they'd stabbed you in the back. They tried to get rid of you, you know, throw Kamala down the chute, too, if you're Biden on the way out the door.
He doesn't look good in a bathing suit. Well, Mike, man, you are a legend. We appreciate you. Also, send us the link to your
Sovereign
newsletter.
Sunday.
Yeah, your newsletter. We'll put it in the comments for those that are watching it after the fact. But we appreciate you, man. And for everybody else watching, we're going to be going live every Tuesday and Friday to get our feet wet. This is what, our third live, I think. But on days we do not go live, we put content out that we record that day. Just so stay tuned with us. We thank you for watching and subscribing. And again, Mike, you are a legend, my friend.
It was great to be here. Thanks for having me, guys. You guys are terrific. Look forward to talking again soon.
We'll have you on again.
We will.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks for joining.
Cheers.